Rainbow Magic, the Jewel Fairies. India the Moonstone Fairy by Daisy Meadows. The locations are the Fairyland Palace, Twisty Tree, Pegasus, Tippington Manor, Adventure Playground, Fountain, the Tall Toy Store, Tippington Town, Rachel's House, Buttercup Farm, Chestnut Tree, Cherrywell Village, Jack Frost's Ice Castle. By frosty magic I cast away these 7 jewels with their fairy rays, so their magic powers will not be felt, and my icy castle shall not melt. The fairies may search high and low to find the gems and take them home, but I will send my goblin guards to make the fairies' mission hard. Content: a nasty nightmare, fairy news, lost, on the right track, the big chase, rockabye goblins. A nasty nightmare. Kirsty, help! Rachel Walker shouted. The goblins are going to get me. Breathing hard, Rachel glanced behind her. She was running as fast as she could, but the green goblins were getting closer and closer. They were grinning nastily, showing their pointed teeth. Now one of them had grabbed Rachel by the shoulder and was shaking her. Rachel! Kirsty Tate was leaning over her friend's bed, trying to awake her. Wake up! You're having a nightmare. Rachel sat up in bed. What time is it? She asked. I had a dream that there were horrible goblins chasing me, and I couldn't get away. It's 7:30, Kirsty replied, sitting on the edge of the bed. Why were the goblins after you in your dream? Rachel frowned. I can't remember, she said, sighing. But you know what, Kirsty? I have a funny feeling that Jack Frost might be causing trouble again. Kirsty's eyes opened wide. Do you really think so? She gasped. Then maybe our fairy friends need our help. Rachel and Kirsty shared a magical secret. They had become friends with the fairies. Whenever there was a problem in Fairyland, Kirsty and Rachel were asked to help. The fairies' biggest enemy was Jack Frost. He and his mean goblins were always causing problems. Not long ago, Jack Frost had mixed up all the weather in Fairyland, but luckily Kirsty and Rachel had come to the rescue. We'll have to keep our eyes open, Rachel agreed. If the fairies need our help, they'll let us know somehow. Kirsty nodded. Well, it's only the beginning of our school break, and I'm staying with you for the whole week, she pointed out, so we have lots of time. Before Rachel could reply, she felt a gentle tug at her neck. Both she and Kirsty jumped. What was that? Kirsty asked. Rachel looked at her friend. You felt it too? Rachel looked down and gasped. The locket around her neck was glowing. Look, Kirsty, she cried. Your locket is glowing too. Rachel and Kirsty took a closer look at their necklaces. Rachel was right. The lockets were glowing with a faint pink light. After helping the weather fairy stop Jack Frost from mixing up the weather in Fairyland, Rachel and Kirsty had each been given a beautiful locket. The lockets were filled with fairy dust, and the girls wore them every day, but they had never glowed like this before. What could it mean? There was only one way to find out. The girls were pretty sure that another fairy adventure wasn't far away. Let's open them, Rachel, Kirsty whispered. Holding their breath, both girls slowly pried open their lockets. Immediately, a glittering shower of multicolored fairy dust burst from both lockets. It swirled around the girls, wrapping them in a cloud of sparkles and lifting them off their feet. Fairy news. After a minute or two, the sparkles began to fade. Rachel and Kirsty felt their feet lightly touch the ground. They blinked a few times and looked around. Kirsty, we're in Fairyland, Rachel gasped. In our pajamas, Kirsty added. The girls were fairy-sized and had glittering wings on their backs. They were standing in the golden great hall of Fairyland, of the fairy palace. King Auburn, Queen Titania, and a small crowd of fairies stood in front of them. The girls noticed that all the fairies looked very worried. Queen Titania stepped forward. "Welcome back, girls," she said with a smile. "I hope you don't mind us bringing you here without warning." "Of course not," Rachel said quickly. "You have been such good friends to us in the past." The queen went on. "We were hoping you might be able to help us again." "I'm afraid that we are in trouble." "What's wrong?" asked Kirsty. "Let me explain," the queen replied sadly. "Every year at Halloween, we have a huge celebration in Fairyland. That's when all the fairies recharge their fairy magic for another year. Every fairy in Fairyland parades around the grand square," King Auburn added. Then they all marched into the palace where Queen Titania's crown rests upon a velvet pillow. "It sounds wonderful," Rachel said. She hoped that she and Kirsty would be allowed to watch the parade one day. Queen Titania nodded. "It is," she replied, "and my crown is a very important part of fairy magic. It contains 7 beautiful jewels. A sparkling fountain of fairy dust pours from each of the 7 jewels, and they join together to form a great glittering rainbow." Kirsty and Rachel listened carefully. Their eyes widened. "What happens then?" Kirsty asked. "Each fairy must recharge her wand by dipping it in the rainbow," the queen explained. "Then she will be able to perform magic for another year." The king shook his head sadly. "But now Jack Frost has ended all that," he said, sighing. 2 nights ago, he crept into the palace and stole the 7 jewels from Queen Titania's crown." "Oh no!" Rachel and Kirsty explained together. "Our special celebration is only a week away," the queen went on, looking worried. "So the fairies' magic is already running low. The jewels must be returned to the crown. The jewels must be returned to the crown before the Jewel Fairies run out of magic completely," King Auburn added. "Does this mean that there will be no magic at all left in Fairyland?" asked Kirsty exhaustedly. "Not exactly," the queen replied. "Fairy magic is more complicated than that. Some magic, like weather magic and rainbow magic, isn't controlled by the jewels, but the jewels do control some of the most important kinds of magic," the king added. They are in charge of things like flying, wishes, and sweet dreams. Some people have already started to have nightmares." Rachel nodded, thinking about her own scary dream. "We have to get the jewels back," she said firmly. "Where is Jack Frost now?" Kirsty asked. "Did he take the jewels to his ice castle?" The queen shook her head. "Jack Frost doesn't have the jewels anymore," she said. "Come with us. We will show you what happened." Rachel and Kirsty followed the fairies outside to the beautiful palace gardens. They stopped next to the golden pool. Its surface was as clear and smooth as glass. "Watch," Queen Titania said softly, waving her wand over the water. Immediately, tiny ripples spread across the surface of the pool. The ripples grew bigger and bigger, and a picture slowly appeared in the water. "It's Jack Frost!" Rachel cried. Tall, thin Jack Frost stood in front of Queen Titania's golden crown. The 7 magic jewels glittered as streams of magic dust poured from them. Laughing, Jack Frost thrust his wand into the magic rainbow, where it glowed like fire. "He is recharging his magic," King Oberon explained. Kirsty and Rachel watched in dismay as Jack Frost pulled the gems out of the crown. He waved his wand, and immediately the jewels were surrounded by ice. "What is he doing?" Rachel asked, confused. "The light and heat of the jewels makes it difficult for cold creatures like Jack Frost and his goblins to hold," Queen Titania explained. Now Jack Frost was flying back to his ice castle by a frosty wind. He held the jewels in his arms, but Rachel and Kirsty could see that the ice around them was already beginning to melt. Jack Frost swooped down from the gray sky and landed in his ice castle. By now, the ice around the jewels was almost gone. The jewels glowed, casting shimmering rays of light into every corner of the icy room. Goblins came running to see the gems. They wore sunglasses to protect their eyes from the light. "Stand back, you fools!" Jack Frost roared, waving his wand and casting another spell to cover the jewels with ice. But the jewels were still glowing and the ice began to melt. "Look, Master!" yelled one of the goblins. "The fairy magic is melting your castle!" Jack Frost looked around in rage. Sure enough, water was beginning to trickle down the icy walls, and there was a huge puddle at the foot of his ice throne. "Jack Frost's magic is not strong enough to block the power of the jewels," Queen Titania told Rachel and Kirsty. The girls watched as the goblins began rushing around, mopping up the water as fast as they could. But as soon as they soaked up one puddle, 2 more appeared. "Fine," Jack Frost, stomping his feet in anger. "If I cannot keep the magic jewels, no one else can have them either. I will cast a spell to get rid of them," and he raised his wand high above his head. "Lost!" "Oh no," Kirsty gasped. She and Rachel watched in honor as a chilly blast of wind tore through the ice castle. The glowing jewels were sent spinning out of the window, where they scattered. "See how the jewels grew larger as they fall into the human world?" Queen Titania pointed out. The image in the pool began to flicker and fade because they are magical. "The jewels will hide themselves until we can find them and bring them back to Fairyland." The pictures in the pool was fading fast, but just before it disappeared, Rachel saw one of the jewels, a cream-colored stone, fall into someone's backyard. Rachel was surprised to realize that she knew whose yard it was. Queen Titania shook her head sadly as the image vanished. "All of our fairy scene magic is used up," she said, sorry. "The pool can't show us where all the jewels have gone. But I know where one of them is," Rachel burst out excitedly. "I recognize the yard where it fell." Everyone turned to stare at her. "Are you sure, Rachel?" Kirsty asked. Rachel nodded. "It was Mr. and Mrs. Palmer's backyard," she explained. "The Palmers are my parents' friends. I've been to their house lots of times to help my mom babysit their little girl Ellie. One of the fairies was so excited to hear this that she soared up into the air. Her long brown hair streamed out behind her. "I'm Indy the Moonstone Fairy," she cried, her eyes shining, "and I'm sure it was my moonstone that fell into your friend's backyard." The little fairy wore a pretty dress with fluttering skirt. The dress was white, but every time Indy moved, Rachel and Kirsty could see shimmering flashes of pink and blue on her feet. Indy wore dainty white sandals. "You must meet all our Jewel Fairies," said King Ombra as the other fairies crowded around. "Each one is responsible for teaching all the other fairies in Fairyland how to use her jewels' magic." He pointed at Indy the Moonstone Fairy. "Indy teaches tree magic, while Scarlet the Garnet Fairy teaches growing and shrinking magic. Emily the Emerald Fairy teaches seeing magic. Chloe the Topzaz Fairy teaches changing and transforming magic. Amy the Amethyst Fairy teaches appearing and disappearing magic. Sophie the Sapphire Fairy teaches wishing magic. And Lucy the Diamond Fairy teaches flying magic." Rachel and Kirsty smiled at all the Jewel Fairies. "We'll do our best to get your jewels back," Kirsty said. "Thank you," the fairies replied. "We knew you would help us," Queen Titania said gratefully, "but Jack Frost knows we will be trying to find the jewels too. He has sent his goblins into the human world to guard them. The goblins will have trouble picking up the jewels," King Ombra continued. "The bright light and magic of the gems will burn them because goblins belong to the cold, icy world of Jack Frost. Instead, the goblins will probably hide near the jewels and try to keep us from getting them back." Rachel and Kirsty nodded. They were eager to see the goblins again, but they had to help their fairy friends. Queen Titania looked serious. "So we not only need your help to find each magic jewel," she said, "but to outwit the goblins that are guarding them." "We'll find a way to get the jewels back," Rachel said firmly. Kirsty nodded. King Ombra smiled at them. "And you will have our Jewel Fairies to help you." Rachel frowned. "I had a dream that goblins were chasing me," she said. Indy sighed, looking very sad. "Without the moonstone, the fairy power to send sweet dreams into the human world is fading," she explained. "That's why you had a nightmare, Rachel. Indy will return with you to your world," said Queen Titania. She'll help you find the moonstone." "We know we have to look in the Palmer's backyard," Kirsty said, "but how will we know where to search for the other jewels?" Queen Titania smiled. "You must let the magic come to you," she replied. "The Jewel Fairies will find you. The jewels will find you. And remember, they have grown bigger in the human world, so they will be easier to spot." Rachel and Kirsty nodded. Then Indy fluttered over to join them. The fairy queen raised her wand. "Good luck," called the fairies. Queen Titania waved her wand, and Rachel, Kirsty, and Indy disappeared in a shower of magic sparkles. When the cloud of fairy dust had vanished, Rachel and Kirsty realized that they were back in Rachel's bedroom. "We must get to work right away, girls," called a silvery voice. The girls turned and saw Indy perched on top of Rachel's mirror. "Yes, let's go over to the Palmer's house now," said Rachel eagerly. She headed for the door. Suddenly, Kirsty burst out laughing. "I think we better change out of our pajamas first, don't you?" "Good idea," Rachel grinned. "How will we get into the Palmer's backyard?" Indy asked the girls. Quickly got As the girls quickly got dressed, we could throw a ball over the fence, Kirsty suggested. Then we can ask the Palmers to let us into their yard to find it. Yes, that will work, Rachel agreed. Girls, are you awake, Mrs. Walker? Boisterous stood up the stairs. Breakfast is ready. Indy fluttered across the room and hid herself in Kirsty's pocket, and the girls hurried downstairs. Mom, said Rachel, as she and Kirsty ate toast and cereal, is it okay if we go out to play after breakfast? Sure, Mrs. Walker agreed, but don't go farther than the park and be back in time for lunch. Thanks, Mom, Rachel said, getting up out of her chair. Kirsty did the same. We need a ball, she whispered as they head outside. There's one in the shed, I think, Rachel replied. The girls found a tennis ball and headed down the street. Even though it was autumn, it was a warm day. The sun shone down brightly from the blue sky. I hope my moonstone is safe, Indy said, softly popping her head out of Kirsty's pocket. I wonder if there are any problems gardening. We'll find out soon, Rachel replied, stopping in front of the house was a bright house. The house was only 3 doors down from Rachel on the corner of the street. Rachel took the ball out of her pocket and slipped it around the corner and tossed it over the fence into the backyard. Then she joined Kirsty and Indy in the front. I'll knock on the door, Rachel said, leading the way up the front steps. Let's hope they're home, Rachel replied Kirsty. Rachel rang the bell, but everything was quiet for a while. Just as the girls and Indy were starting to give up hope, the door opened. Hello, Rachel, said Mrs. Palmer, smiling, and this must be Kirsty. Rachel told me she was having a friend visit this week. It's nice to meet you, Kirsty said politely. Sorry to disrupt you, Mrs. Palmer, Rachel said, but I'm afraid we just lost our ball in your backyard. Mrs. Palmer smiled. As a matter of fact, I was just sitting out back with Ellie. I didn't see your ball. Do you want to come and look for it? Yes, please, Rachel replied. If you don't mind, added Kirsty. Mrs. Palmer opened the door. Go right through. I'm just going to run upstairs for a minute. Ellie's in her stroller on the patio if you want to say hello. Rachel led Kirsty through the kitchen and out of the back door. Indy popped her head out of Kirsty's pocket. The moonstone is here somewhere, she said. She cried happily. I can feel it. It's a big guard, Kirsty said. We'll better start looking right away. She and Indy hurried over to the nearest flower bed and began to look through the shrubs. Meanwhile, Rachel went across the patio to say hello to Ellie, but as she walked towards the stroller, Rachel began to shiver. Suddenly there was a chill in the air. A loud wail came from the stroller. Ellie started to cry. Ellie must be feeling cold too, Rachel thought, but it was warm a minute ago. Mrs. Palmer rushed out of the house and ran over to the stroller. It's very strange, she said. She pushed back the shade and bent down to pick up baby Ellie. Ellie's always had trouble sleeping. Then yesterday we got this mobile for her stroller and she's been sleeping so well, Mrs. Palmer frowned. Lifting Ellie out from under her blanket, something seems to be upsetting her today. She's been restless all morning, and Mrs. Palmer picked up Ellie, the baby, stretched out her chubby little hand to grab one of the decorations hanging from the mobile. Rachel looked to the mobile closely. It was hung with silver stars, yellow sun, and pale moons, and then suddenly her heart skipped a beat. There There, glittering in the middle of the mobile, was a cream-colored snow that flashed with pink and blue light. The moonstone, Rachel thought excitedly. No wonder Ellie's been sleeping well. She must have had extra sweet dreams. I'm going to take Ellie inside, but feel free to keep looking for your ball, said Mrs. Palmer. I don't want Ellie to catch a cold. It's a little chilly. All of a sudden. I hope that doesn't mean some of Jack Frost's goblins are nearby, Rachel thought, as Mrs. Palmer turned to go inside. With Ellie, Rachel ran across the grass towards Kirsty and Indy. They were searching around the bird bath in the middle of the yard. I found the moonstone, Rachel whispered triumphantly. It's hanging in the middle of the mobile on Ellie's stroller. Wonderful, Indy gasped. Way to go, Rachel added. Kirsty, Mrs. Palmer's taking Ellie inside, said Rachel. We can get the moonstone as soon as she's gone. The girls and Indy watched as Mrs. Palmer carried Ellie into the house. Then Rachel and Kirsty immediately ran towards the stroller. Indy flew along the side, but before they could reach it, the door of the garden shed crashed open and 2 green goblins rushed out. The big chase. The moonstone is ours, one of the goblins yelled. We'll never let the fairies have it back. Never, never, shouted the other goblin as Kirsty and Indy watched in honor as the second goblin jumped up onto the stroller and grabbed the mobile. He's going to take the moonstone, Rachel gasped. Stop him. As the girls rushed towards the stroller, the other goblin panicked. He rushed to push the stroller away from the girls, but the stroller was much bigger than the goblin, who was only knee-high. He couldn't control it. The stroller bumped and bounced over the grass. The goblin inside was caught off balance. With a scratch of rage, he tumbled over and got tangled in the baby's blanket before he could grab the moonstone. Kirsty and Rachel and Indy chased after the goblin as he charged around the grass, pushing the stroller in front of him. They could see the moonstone swinging wildly on the mobile, but they couldn't reach it. The goblins were too far ahead. The stroller jolted along while the goblins inside struggled to free himself from the tangle of the blanket. He shouted at his friends to stop, but with no luck. Then all of a sudden the wheel hit a large stone flying in the middle of the yard. The stroller was moving so quickly that it flipped over. Both goblins let out cries of alarm as they flew through the air. They landed in a heap underneath a large pine tree covered by Ellie's blanket. Indy, can you keep them from getting away? Kirsty panted as she and Rachel ran across the yard towards the goblins. I only have a little dream magic left. It might be enough to put the goblins to sleep, Indy replied. She flew ahead of the girls and hovered around over the goblins. Waving her wand, a few sparkles of fairy dust drifted down. The goblins stopped struggling to free themselves and began yawning and rubbing their eyes. I'm so tired, one of them said with a sigh. And this blanket is really warm and cozy, the other one said sleepily. I think I might take a little nap. Me too, the first goblin agreed. Sing me a lullaby. No, you sing me a lullaby, the second goblin demanded. No, you, yelled the first. They're waking themselves up with their silly argument, Rachel exclaimed. What are we going to do? I think I have an idea, Kirsty whispered. I think I have an idea, Kirsty whispered. Without saying anything else, she hurried towards the goblin. rock-a-bye goblins. Rachel and Indy watched as Kirsty walked right up to the goblins and began to tuck them into their blankets. Now, settle down, she said in a soft, sweet voice. It's time for your nap. The goblins stopped arguing and started yawning again. I am sleepy, the first goblin mumbled, snuggling down under the pink blanket, but the second goblin was trying hard to keep his eyes open. Isn't there something we were supposed to do? He asked. Rachel hurried over to help Kirsty. Go to sleep now, she said in a soothing voice. You can worry about that later. Then Kirsty began to sing a lullaby to the tune of Rock-a-Bye Baby. Rock-a-bye goblins under a tree, out in the backyard sleeping with glee. When you wake up from your little nap, you'll find that Indy has her stone back. By the second line of Kirsty's song, both goblins were snoring loud. Nice job, Kirsty, Rachel said with a grin, but we can't leave the goblins here for Mrs. Palmer to find. Leave that to me, Indy chimed in. She waved her wand over a large branch of the pine tree. Immediately, the branch dropped lower so that it completely covered the sleeping goblins. Perfect, Kirsty declared. The goblins are green like leaves, so they'll be well hidden under until they wake up. Indy and Rachel laughed. Then they'll have to go back to Jack Frost and tell him they lost the moonstone, Indy said. They'll be in big trouble. Chuckling quietly, the girls picked up the stroller and pushed it back to the patio. Then as Indy watched happily, Kirsty carefully took the moonstone from the middle of the mobile. It flashed and gleamed in the sunlight. We can't ruin Ellie's mobile, Indy said. She waved her wand and a glittering, shiny bubble appeared in place of the moonstone. As it caught the light, it sent rainbow colors sparkling in all directions. And now, Indy went on, the moonstone is going right back to Fairyland and Queen Titania's crown, where it belongs. She touched her wand to the jewel. Immediately, a fountain of sparkling fairy dust shot up into the air. The moonstone vanished. Thank you, girls, Indy said, grinning at Rachel and Kirsty. I must go home now, but I hope you can help the other Jewel Fairies find their magic jewels. Jewels too. We'll do our best, Rachel promised. Goodbye, Indy, Kirsty added as their fairy friend flew away in a cloud of sparkles. I wonder where the 6 other jewels are hiding, and I wonder if we'll have to face many more goblins, Kirsty said with a frown. Rachel shivered, remembering her nightmare. I just hope I don't dream about them again tonight, she said. Kirsty laughed. Don't worry, Rachel said. She told her friend, Indy has the moonstone back, and you helped her find it. She's sure to send you sweet dreams.